We've all seen the poor. It seems everywhere we go nowadays, we're confronted with the specter of poverty. Homeless veterans holding cardboard signs at highway off-ramps. Tent City underneath the downtown overpass where the indigent once camped before outdoor sleeping was banned countywide. Farm communities not far from us and factory towns just up the road, upended by tariffs, teetering on the precipice of poverty. Coal miners southeast of us, slowly drowning from black lung disease as new regulations make it harder for them to be diagnosed and treated. Their families just one breath away from ruin. Suburban neighbors, just one paycheck, one mortgage, one work injury or health crisis away from being out on the streets themselves. Poverty hasn't gone away as much as we'd hoped with LBJ's War on Poverty program. Compared to 1968, 60% more Americans are living below the official poverty line today. 41 million people. Every 13th person we meet in America is poor. Everywhere we go nowadays, we're confronted with the specter of poverty. Today's story from Luke tells of the lives and fates of a rich and poor man, and we're invited to listen in. None of us are rich. Our pictures don't grace the covers of Fortune 500. We don't hobnob with the Rockefellers, Bill and Melinda Gates, Jeff Bezos, or Warren Buffett. None of us vacation on the Riviera. We don't have a penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Caviar and champagne aren't regular fare at our house. We don't have a fleet of limos to ferry us around or a private jet to whisk us wherever we want. We don't have butlers or nannies to tend to our needs, nor do we own a tropical island where our fleet of yachts is docked. We're not rich, and given the U.S. has both the highest income inequality and lowest economic mobility, we never will be rich. Look at this rich man in our story. He lives in a big mansion on the hill. It's surrounded by fences and gates to let the right people in and keep the wrong people out. None of us would ever make it on the guest list. The furnishing in his palace are elaborately elegant, with the very best in everything. Expensive oriental carpets are thrown about the enormous rooms with exquisite marble columns in the atrium. There are numerous pools for guests with the latest in running water and sanitation available. Servants dash to and fro at the beck and call of this rich man. His wardrobe is the latest in style. He wears purple, the color of royalty, to let others know his social status. This is a man who has made it. Every day, he enjoys gourmet dining. He and his select friends party late into the night, since none of them have to work in the morning. This rich man enjoys the good life. If we're honest, we'd like to enjoy it too. We may be envious of his lifestyle, but we know we'll never enjoy it. We are not like the rich man. We do not travel in moneyed circles. None of us are rich. Sometimes we pass by the poor. We look the other way when confronted by poverty. It isn't easy to see people who are down and out. America's new hobos walk the streets of cities and are getting gentrified and squeezed out of Over the Rhine, North Side, and West End. Some push beat-up shopping carts filled with what looks like junk, but are actually their worldly possessions. We pass by others as we make our way to work. They have overgrown beards, greasy hair tucked under an old cap, dressed in filthy t-shirts and soiled blue jeans. Skin is dark from sun and dirt, hands chapped and grimy. We sit in our cars impatiently waiting for the light to change so we don't have to look upon them. We don't want to see these people, for they make us uncomfortable. We glance the other way, pretending they're invisible. Lazarus must have felt the same way. Day after day, too weak to stand, he sat and begged for scraps. But no one saw him. He was invisible, though he sat at the gate of the rich man's house. This should have been a prime spot for begging, much like the off-ramps at interstates. But no one took notice of him. Even though he was there, the only ones who paid him any mind were dogs. They came to lick his sores. Poverty does make us uncomfortable. Maybe a little angry too. We say to ourselves, well, they just need to get a job. Lazy bums, they should be ashamed of themselves. If they can afford cigarettes, why should I give them any money? They'll probably just spend it on beer. The poor do make us uncomfortable. There's a spirit of anger at the poor these days, blaming them for their poverty, as if anyone would choose to be poor. The poor make us uncomfortable because they expose the underside of the American dream. Not everyone can make it. We tell ourselves that with enough elbow grease and initiative, anyone can be a success in America. We've all been raised on the Horatio Alger myth that a poor boy working hard can become a success. We forget the ending of the story where he marries the daughter of a banker. We like to think that with determination, anyone can be a success in America. It's not that simple, though. Times have changed. The American dream of owning a home in the suburbs with 2 cars is increasingly out of the reach of many. Real wages have steadily declined since the early 70s. $1 doesn't go as far as it used to. The growing numbers of poor stand as silent witnesses to the fantasy that the American dream has become. We don't want to face the facts that the poor bring us. Poverty is something we prefer to glance over. God remembers those we forget. People that we overlook, the Lord sees. Those we pass by, God comes for. Lazarus was invisible during his life. People stepped around him without even glancing down. He whom no one regarded is not even given a decent funeral. He's probably taken to the pauper cemetery and tossed in a mass grave. Lazarus gets no headstone. He who was invisible during his life is invisible in death. No one comes to pay their last respects to Lazarus. He dies alone and without notice. Look at how the rich man leaves this world, however. He who lived to the fullest goes out with a bang as well. The whole town shows up for his lavish funeral. He has the finest mahogany casket lined with silk. He's dressed in his priciest suit. The chariot procession stretches for miles to the graveyard. The best floral arrangements are there. Imported orchids gave their lives for this extravagant funeral. Surely he'll enter the next life with as much pomp and circumstance. But hold on. Something's amiss. We notice this rich man doesn't even have a name. God doesn't remember him or count him among the blessed. The tables have been turned in the afterlife. The first has become last, and the last first. The rich man had a good life on earth, while Lazarus' life was miserable. Lazarus, a beggar on earth, has entered into his rich reward in heaven. The rich man on earth now begs for mercy in the afterlife. The one who was once a beggar is no more. The one who once had it all is now a beggar. Lazarus has entered into his reward while the rich man reaps what he has sown. Wealth is not what keeps the rich man from heaven, however. Abraham, who received Lazarus into his bosom, was a wealthy man himself. Wealth doesn't necessarily keep us out of heaven. It's not the size of the bank account that matters. It's the size of the heart. What matters is whether we serve neighbors. The rich man doesn't see Lazarus, but God preserves Lazarus' name, unlike the rich man. God remembers Lazarus even if the world does not. Lazarus' name means he whom God has helped. The world didn't help him, but God did. The Lord remembers his name. The last has become first in the kingdom. Folks that we ignore, God chooses for the head of the line. People that we overlook, God sees. God remembers those we forget. Eavesdropping on others is considered bad manners. We've all been taught that it's rude to listen in on other people's conversations. We have a very strange story here, however. We're given the privilege of spying on a dialogue among the dead. Spirits of the dead are conversing among themselves, and we have a chance to listen in. We're familiar with this phenomenon, as Ouija boards are sold at local stores. Seances attempt to contact the spirits of the deceased. In this story, Lazarus, the rich man, and Abraham all talk to each other. What a strange thing this is. What is usually hidden from mortals has been revealed in this story. The gulf between the dead and us has been crossed over with this account. This is an odd thing. Abraham declines to send a messenger back from the dead to warn the rich man's family. They get no warning. No one alerts them where their ways will lead them. The alarm isn't sounded. We presume they'll wind up with their brother in Hades too. Although a messenger isn't sent for the rich man's family, We have listened in on the conversation. We've heard the warning that wasn't given to his family. There's still a chance we can mend our ways so we don't end up with them. A warning flare has been fired into the night sky for us. We still have time to help our neighbors in need. The chasm that can't be crossed, created by God, awaits us in the afterlife. In the life to come, there's a gulf separating Hades from paradise, fixed by God. In our present life, there are divisions between us, which we have created. In the afterlife, there's neither time nor opportunity to cross the chasm. There is time and opportunity now in this life to cross those barriers. The chasms we create in this world can be crossed now. The divisions that separate us are humanly made. We have an opportunity to bridge those barriers, to tear down those walls that divide us. Compassion for others can build bridges between us. Love for neighbors can heal our splits. The gates and fences that keep the poor and others outside our lives can be torn down. Lazarus waits outside our gate, and we can cross over to help him. The Lazarus that sits outside our gate is waiting now. The message has been sent to us. Unlike the rich man's family, we've received the news. Overhearing the conversations of others is often regarded as rude. Eavesdropping on others is considered bad manners, but not in this case. Although none of us are rich, sometimes we pass by the poor. Wealth won't necessarily keep us out of heaven, for Abraham was wealthy. Being blind to the needs of others, however, whether poor or not, is the problem. Sometimes it's hard to see the needs of others. God sees the needs of the poor and calls us to struggle with them against the evil of poverty. God has a soft spot for the poor. Those we forget, God remembers. We've overheard the message the rich man's family didn't receive. There's still time for us to help our neighbors in need. We have been shown such abundant mercy by Christ, who, as 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9 says, though he was rich, yet for our sake he became poor, so that by his poverty we might become rich. God has shown us so much mercy and asks that we too be generous to neighbors in need. We have been given so much and asked to share so little in comparison with the Lazarus at our gate. We're all beggars in need of mercy outside the gates of heaven. All of us need God's mercy in our lives. Our Lord is a God overflowing in mercy to both poor and rich. Thanks be to God. Amen.